you gotta read all this and report by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just remember,
I'm in grants, I do.
Yeah.
just remember, there's a lot of filler in there, like, you know, you might wanna tell them about that, like we talked.
Yeah, he told me that. I'm ready with that.
What do you call it, filler?
Well,
Repeated information.
Right.
thank you.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
Well, thanks for having us back. We appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you to present the Massac County Courthouse Option Study that we have prepared over the last few months. What I want to do this morning is basically run through really kind of the format of the study so you know where all the information is. And then we can open it up for discussion, I guess, if that's what you'd like to do. Starting with the index, really what you see is the process of the study we have outlined in the way that the study is put together. So we start out with an overview and we basically say, here's the full description of the process that took place and what the outcome of the process was. Then we go into the scope of the work. So we describe the planning process and methodology. We'll go into this here in a second. I'm just going to give a quick overview. And then I go into a summary of activities. So I say, here's the planning process and methodology that you hired us to do. And then here's how we carried that out and what steps we took. And I put a little brief description in there describing, we were here, we interviewed these people on these days, we collected this information, we reviewed the existing structures and made sure that we had documented exactly how the spaces were laid out. And then we talked about the existing conditions. So in going through the buildings, we talked about the physical conditions, the functional limitations, the existing space program. And by space program, that is, I went into every single space in these buildings, and in this building in particular, and said, here's a room that is this big and is occupied by this person in this department, and I assign that square footage to that department. So we have an accurate understanding of exactly what space everybody has, and then by way of the interviews, you know, we determined what space people need. If they had more space than what they needed, that was determined. We looked at population, staff, and space projections, and again, that was through looking at one, population of the county, historical context. So we talked to all the department heads and asked about, you know, going back 20 years, you know, how much staff was there? Do you expect any more staff to be included? Do you have any part-time staff? And all of that was documented. We looked at a space standard diagrams, and so if you remember when we came in for that workshop, those were all those diagrams that said a typical office for this function is about this big. And then we use that as a comparison to what you have, and that way we can make adjustments to the program and say you either have enough space or not enough space for what you're trying to get accomplished as a county. And that helps determine the proposed space program. And the proposed space program becomes a baseline for everything that we studied in this project. Basically what we did was we took your existing spaces that we accurately documented in the building, we adjusted it so that it compensated for not enough space, too much space, and then we documented that in the proposed space program. And so that is the baseline for what we think every department needs in order to carry out their functions. That was then translated into how big is the bank building? How big would an addition on the south side of the jail need to be? How big would spaces need to be within this building to make it function properly? And so then those are going to be shown in the design options, and we'll go into each of these things individually. And then in the appendix, we have the existing plans, which was the documentation that we had, and the PowerPoint presentation that we did when we came into town for the workshop. So we get a little acknowledgement section here where we thank everybody who's involved in the study. Part 2, overview, which is essentially what I just did, was kind of an overview. So you can see during the course of this study, I described what we've done, documented the existing physical condition of the Massac County Courthouse. We conducted interviews with county officials, reviewed existing department staffing, and discussed potential staffing needs. Documented the existing size of departmental shared and public spaces, projected population trend, studied 3 options, and then we provided detailed project cost budgets.
How are you?
Morning, how are you?
Morning.
Got any more of those?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah, we brought 8, so I had them for.
Okay, I think I have the email.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay, thanks.
I'm a short timer.
Don't rub it in.
So I just kind of gave an overview, and right now we're in that overview, which is page 4. Again, this is all what I just kind of covered. But after developing these general options, we reviewed the gathered data, information, and proposed options with county officials and staff at the workshop, and then further developed the options that were discussed and made modifications based on the additional conversation that was involved at the workshop. Scope of the work, I won't read through this initial process and methodology, but as you know, there was a process by which we carried out the study, and it involved really 3 trips for us down here. The first of which was the kind of fact gathering, or establishing the problem. And so what we did was we went through the existing courthouse and looked at all the physical and functional limitations, and interviewed all of the department heads, documented all of the spaces, and tried to get an accurate portrayal of what is occurring within this courthouse. And by occurring, I mean, you know, where do people have, for instance, in the probation department, we sit down and we have a conversation with them, and they discuss the limitations of having to share space and try and have private meetings within that space with the people that they work with. And so that's documented. How much space do they have from wall to wall? How much space does each individual have? Is that sufficient? Do they need more space? Are there things that they can't do within their space that they would like to do? In probation, it might be they do drug testing. And so, you know, where do they have to go outside of their space to do drug testing? Are they using public restrooms to do drug testing as opposed to using restrooms and having a little space within their space to do drug testing? Those are the types of things that we went through the building and through conversations, interviews, came up with that list. Facility development, all of that information was utilized to develop an architectural program and look at the existing facility evaluation, which is, we went around the exterior of the building, took pictures, you know, where are we seeing system failures, where are we seeing issues that, you know, in the long term are gonna continue to be a problem. What about comfort levels within the building? Is it difficult to heat and cool? Is it difficult to keep a constant comfort level? Do you have too much cooling in the summer and too much heating in the winter? Do you have not enough cooling in the summer and not enough heating in the winter? So all of those things were documented. And then that information was utilized in facility development, which was to look at the options that are available and figure out how to best make use of the options that are available. All of that was put into a preliminary report that was distributed. We got information back, and then it was put into the final report. So then, summary of activities, really what we do in this is we take everything that I just said as kind of an outline. Here's what we're going to do as part of this study, and then I say, here's what we did. So this outlines all of the interviews that were held, how the evaluation was done, the information that was gathered. Talks about the workshop and the post-workshop work that we completed. And again, I don't think you want me to read verbatim what all we did. I think everybody's pretty aware of the activities that we completed as part of the study. But it is all documented here so that you have that information, and you can say, when anyone asks, well, how did you look at this, or how did you gather this information? That's all documented in here, so you've got that information at your fingertips. Existing conditions. This begins to talk about the documentation that was gathered. So there were three distinct objectives in looking at the existing courthouse. First, the physical condition of the courthouse was observed and documented. This is critical so that the scope of the remodel renovation project could be determined. Second, the spaces in the courthouse were toured so that an accurate updated plan could be documented. This is critical so that the accurate existing space allocations could be assigned to each user group department and an existing space program could be developed. Finally, the staff was able to describe both the physical and functional limitations of the existing facility. And then I go into a description of those. Obviously, within this building, I won't rehash everything, we talked about this during the workshop, but, you know, outside air infiltration, water infiltration, the systems are aged. We're talking about a 70-year-old facility, so there's obviously going to be things that continue to come up, not the least of which is the exterior of the building. There's, with every freeze-thaw cycle, there's the potential for spalling and deterioration of those systems on the exterior. So making sure that those are repaired is critical. I know that, you know, a new roof has been installed that I think probably solved a lot of issues that were associated with the previous system up there. Heating and cooling, you've got the window air conditioners, so it's really easy to get some areas really cold in the summer, but then other areas don't get the cooling that the areas immediately adjacent to the air conditioning units do. Heating, same thing, some areas really hot in the winter, some areas not enough heat. So it's just difficult. That's typical of a building this age, is just that you don't have the systems in place in these buildings to very equally distribute heating and cooling. And so that's not atypical, but it is a challenge of being in these buildings. Functional limitations, we've discussed some of those. Just some spaces have more space than they need. You know, you look at general assistants downstairs, they have a lot of room. You look at emergency management, not enough room, and certainly not the spaces that you would need in that would be ideal in a emergency situation where you may want space for staff to, you know, have a spot to go rest for a couple hours or get something to eat. You don't have that within your space, because you could be in a 24, 48-hour situation where everybody's on the whole time and needs to be here, and being able to get away for 2 hours and grab a nap, you know, can be critical. Not having that within your department, you know, is something that was accounted for. Mentioned, you know, some functional limitations for spaces like probation. In the courts, I think that, you know, we've talked about the ideal, there would be more space for attorney-client discussions. We've talked about the law library. Is it bigger than it needs to be, and that a private conference room might be a little bit more advantageous for the department and really for staff as a whole to share upstairs. So those are some things that were documented. Get into some of the fact-based stuff here. On page 15, you see the existing courthouse space program. So we went in and documented every single space, including walls, chases, and circulation, and gave you a building gross square foot of 28,925 square feet on this building. So through all of the activities that I've been describing, we went through and documented all of these spaces, and you can see all of those spaces broken down back in the pages 16 and on. There's all of the individual spaces in there, broken down by first floor, second floor, and then there's the old jail. So basement, first floor, second floor, old jail. Behind that are the floor plans that show how all those spaces were documented and where we assigned spaces to the different departments. So you can, between the spreadsheet and this diagram, you can see, you know, exactly how we assign the spaces. And that was, again, through touring the building and talking with the individual department heads. Space standards, this is something that was a review, for many of you that were in the workshop. But what we did was, now that we have an accurate documentation of the existing spaces, we went through and evaluated those spaces. We interviewed all of the staff that worked in these spaces. We utilized space standards, which are, based on our experience and really just some architectural, standards for how big spaces ought to be for typical functions. And we went through and provided a score, an evaluation score to each of those spaces, and you can see the summary of those scores on page 22. And so, for instance, commissioner's room, for, a large group meeting, this space isn't necessarily adequate. It certainly doesn't have any space for individual workspaces. So that got a lower score than, say, general assistants, which had more than enough space in their existing space. They had a lot of space. They have, probably 2 times as much space as they needed. So we went through, and this helps us gauge, one, where the strengths and weaknesses are for the space that you have allocated for each of the departments. And if there are spaces like general assistants that might have more space than they need, and other departments that have less, then we can take that into account and utilize that space for some other functions. So behind all of that are all of the individual departments and how each of the individual spaces was rated. And again, this is something that we had with us at the workshop. We went through each of these spaces individually with all the departments, made adjustments. If people felt like some scores were a little low for what they thought, or a little high for what they thought, then that was taken into account. Some of those we made adjustments on. Others, if we felt like, no, we've got that evaluated properly, then we left it as it was. And for your reference, on pages 33 on back through 54, we have those space standards. And so on a study like this, we are not drawing every space that might go into a building. We're not designing yet. But I think it's important that the owner understand what those spaces might look like. What does 240 square feet for an office look like? Why does it make sense that it be that big? So those are why you have these little office diagrams in here. It shows you what kind of space is available in that type of square footage, and why we assign those square footages, the square footages that we do. When it comes to designing, then that can be taken into account. We can look at things like this and say, you know what, that's plenty of office space for what I need. That's more than I need. I don't need a 5-person table in there along with my desk and cabinets. But I think that having a picture to look at is important at this stage to the degree possible. Like I said, we're not designing yet, we're planning. We're talking about the how bigs and the whats of your needs, and not really, the details of each space, or even for that matter, how each space within the groups are designed. But this gives you some background on what those might look like, and so those are included for your reference.
Anybody have a question on what he just said? To me, that was one thing that I really questioned him on. He's just trying to show you, if you got 250 square foot, that's what those diagrams show you, is what you'll have the end result. So, I thought that was very interesting that, it gives you a picture in your mind before you even put it into place of how much, square feet will do for you.
So based on it, does anybody have any questions on anything else at this point? So then at this point in the study, we've looked at the existing facility, we've talked to the staff, we've evaluated the existing spaces. We've now adjusted those existing spaces. So if we said that, I was picking on probation earlier, so I'll just stick with that. If we said that probation ideally, probation has these spaces in this square footage. Ideally, through that evaluation, they would have these spaces in this square footage. That was taken and we created a proposed space program, which says, here's what you had, here's how we evaluated it, here's what you need, and we made adjustments. So if there are any departments that talked about, you know, we don't have enough space, or we have too much space, that was modified and created the proposed space program. That becomes the document by which, kind of everything from this point, this serves as a baseline. This is something as an owner you can look at and say, I think that that's, you know, there's the potential that there would be an additional staff that's not accounted for here that we would wanna add, or, you know, this supports everything that you'll see from this point on in the report. So it describes why we think that spaces need to be this big, why departments need to be this big, why buildings or renovations need to be this big. And so going through there, you can see that what we did was we took that existing net square footage, adjusted it based on that evaluation, and then we grossed it up by a factor of 1.3. And what that grossing factor does is it takes into account walls, chases, interior circulation, all of the things that are not office spaces or restrooms or things like that. So that accounts for some grossing factor. It's important to keep in mind that that is a number that is based on experience. That does not mean that you are going to end up needing 1.3 factor on all of this. If we design a really efficient building, it might be 1.2. Does that make sense to everybody?
I'm gonna elaborate with it, what do you mean the difference in 1.2 and 1.3?
So we've got, what we have accounted for in here with the adjusted net square footage is we say that this room right here is 15 by 15. That is a square footage. What it doesn't take into account is the thickness of that wall. Or if there's a corridor in the middle of this space and there's 2 offices there and 2 offices here, it doesn't take into account that circulation in the walls. And so what we do is we say that that net square footage is the space that you need to live in. But that,
The actual usable space.
the actual usable space, that's right. Any space that you can put a table, a chair, a body, walk, that's accounted for in the net square footage. What's not accounted for in that is wall space, chases, circulation space. Because if I say that the public defender needs 684 square feet, that doesn't take in, that's the space that the public defender needs to live in. That doesn't take into account the walls within the public defender's space, or the circulation between the 2 offices within the public defender. So you gross that up, you multiply that number times 1.3. That 1.3 is based on experience. That's pretty typical for this type of building. If you're doing a hospital, it can be as high as 1.5, because circulation is really wide, walls are really thick, there's a lot of chases for medical gas and all of that stuff. So my point is that when we get into actual design, when we get into real design, we may be way more efficient and be able to reduce that grossing number. And the building may be smaller ultimately, but I don't think that's you don't wanna plan for the best and end up with the worst. You wanna kind of plan for, your worst case scenario, but you wanna plan for what the potential is, and then do your best to come down from there. So, from a square footage standpoint, there are opportunities, certainly, and I would expect them, to bring some of these gross square footages down, but I don't think we're in a place now to say concretely that, oh yeah, this says 29,438, but it's gonna be 26. What's the point? I mean, there's no, that, to me, from a planning standpoint, that would not serve you well to do that. So we've gone through all the departments, and again, all of this information was reviewed in the workshop. So all of these square footages, the grossing, the numbers that came out of that, were all reviewed during the workshop. So with the proposed program in place, we then moved into the design options. And it was determined that 3 options would be initially considered. Through the course of the study, it was confirmed that these 3 options were the most appropriate options available to the county. It's not to say that that's going to be the way it always is. Through the course of you guys reviewing the study, you may have us look at something else. You may say, what about some opportunities for a phased approach on this or something like that? And that's certainly something that we're willing to look at. These options were selected for the study because each option represented a different approach, each with its strengths and weaknesses. Through the course of the study, including interviews with staff in the workshop, no other options became evident. The options that were studied include, so we called option A, and again, this goes back to the workshop and how we went through the options in the workshop. Talked about moving the administrative functions into the Banterra Bank building and constructing an addition to the south side of the jail for the county judicial functions. Option B was to construct an addition to the Banterra Bank building and move all courthouse functions to this location. So it'd be taking everything and moving it to the bank building, and what would that entail? And then the final option was to renovate, update, and remodel the existing courthouse and keep all the functions as they are here, and look at how that would work. So from there, we move into each of the options. Option A, renovate the Banterra Bank building, construct a new addition to the south side of the jail. So what we did here was we looked at what functions made the most sense to stay together and moved into the bank building. And the bank building is approximately 20,890 gross square feet. So this option would move the county clerk, county treasurer, county assessor, commissioners, emergency services and disaster agency, general assistance, Shawnee Development, and other miscellaneous maintenance and support spaces over to that building. The proposed space program for those departments is 15,603 gross square feet. So, as you can tell, there's more than enough space in that building for those functions to move in there. And ultimately, what you end up with is a very nice opportunity for not only shared use space, so whether it's break rooms, additional conference rooms, workspace, office space for the commissioners, and then you also end up with a very nice public space. There's a shared space in the basement that could be utilized for any number of opportunities. Large meetings, groups could rent that space from the county. The county could lend it to people to use for large group meetings, presentations, any number of things. But that leftover square feet, the leftover square footage within that building means that you are not trying to cram those functions into a building. You have the opportunity to have some flexibility. You have the opportunity for some departments to grow if needed. You have the opportunity to use shared space that all of the departments can take advantage of. And on the following page, there are some advantages and disadvantages to this. These advantages and disadvantages were compiled by us, RQAW, and through the work group. So there's plenty of space for future expansion and flexibility, provides for public use space. Much of the space is move-in ready. So there are a lot of offices, a lot of corridors that are relatively move-in ready. I mean, I think that we would want to make some smart decisions about what we did, for instance, on flooring. So if you have a nicer carpet in there, for a period of time, that's gonna be fine, but if that's the circulation path for a heavily publicly used department, that's gonna get worn pretty quickly. Does it make sense to go back in with a hard, surface on the hallway, on the floor? So there are some smart things that we can do like that. Other areas of the building are gonna require some remodeling and renovation so that you can put the function that makes sense into that space. For instance, where the teller line is, it's just open to the lobby. It probably makes sense that if that's going to become a department, that become enclosed. Well, that's going to be a little bit heavier renovation than just maybe filling in a door and moving a door over here. I mean, that's putting up a wall potentially, dividing that off, putting new finishes, probably taking down part of the teller line. I don't know that, you know, for some of the, county functions, it makes sense to have a teller line. I mean, that's a good spot for the public to approach, you know, make payments, that type of thing. But if you need that all, I don't know that you need it all the way across that end of the building. So that's, again, something that during design we would work through. The new Justice Building, which we'll get to here in a second, would be very public friendly, with secure circulation separated from public circulation. The new construction can be built energy efficient, and the Banterra Bank Building is newer construction that is likely energy efficient already. Inmates do not have to be escorted outside on the public square to attend court, and jail staff do not need to leave the building to escort inmates. Disadvantages. Parking immediately adjacent to the new justice facility would be limited, but it is right here on the square. So the parking that you already have in this area is what it is, you know, is already here. So I don't know that that's going to be a huge impact, but it's something that we wanted to document. The Banterra Bank Building require a new roof immediately. That was something that was brought up in the, by one of the county staff. I can't remember who brought that up, but it was.
I think we all did.
I think it's in not good shape.
Yeah.
Right, okay,
We
and so
changed.
that was documented. The site south of the jail would provide limited expansion opportunities beyond this addition. So, you know, I don't know that if there's additional opportunities at the jail, but if we add to the south side of the building, are there other opportunities if the jail needs to expand? Or if, for instance, if in 30 years, the addition that we do now needs to expand, where are those options? So are we building out a site and then that's as far as you can go? I mean, it's something to consider. I don't think that with the amount of square footage that we could build on the south side, you would have to worry about that for the foreseeable future. I mean, I think that we can build for that facility well into the future. The jail may be the jail was not part of the study, so I can't tell you what their needs are going to be 10 years from now, 5 years from now, or certainly not 30 years from now. Security could be required at both the bank building and the justice facility rather than at one location. New locations for services and government functions that the public is not used to. So what that is referring to is people are used to coming to a spot, they're used to things looking a certain way. You change that up, that can be a disadvantage. But, you know, it's one that 5 years from now, if you were to do this, it may not be a problem at all, but it's something that we think is important to put in the list. The site south of the existing jail includes a current radio tower. Whether or not that's difficult to switch over if we want to move that, the way we've kind of laid out the building right now is we've kind of taken it into account and we've designed around it. But it may not be a big problem to relocate, to take it down. And I've heard, I think, some feedback where it could be an issue, and then I've heard some feedback that it could be easily handled. So that's something that at the time we would certainly want to take a look at early in the process. And again, I said limits expansion opportunities for the jail. So the addition to the south side of the existing jail would include circuit court, probation, public defender, state's attorney, circuit court clerk, and other support maintenance and miscellaneous spaces. The proposed program suggested would be about 13,835 gross square feet for these functions. 69. I went back to the first page, I'm sorry. I was talking about some advantages and disadvantages, and just decided to go ahead and read through those advantages and disadvantages, but to talk about I forgot to go into the south side of the existing jail, so I'll do that now. So you only need 13,835 gross square feet for the functions that we're talking about putting over there. What that 13,835 does not take into account is a basement for dispatch and 911, which is something that we wanted to take a look at. So there are a couple different options that we can look at in regards to that. The way that we've looked at that is go ahead and build a basement, put dispatch in there, and then leave the balance of that basement as shelled space, which means we don't build it out, we don't create offices, you essentially have a bare bones basement down there. What that does is, one, it provides some expansion opportunity. The county decides that they wanna lease that space to somebody who could use it, or you wanna expand dispatch, or you wanna include some additional storage. I would say that probably 90% of the counties that we've worked with, when we build a basement, we have left anywhere from anywhere from 100% to 50% of a basement shelled space. Because the reason they're building the basement is flexibility, is long-term opportunity, not knowing what you don't know today, understanding that your needs are gonna be different than they are, 5 years and 10 years from now. So while you're building a box, put a basement under it, use what you can today. So in this case, you've got a great need in dispatch 911. I mean, that is a perfect opportunity to put that in the basement. But then the balance of that space, don't finish it, don't put much money into it, put a little bit of heat in there, a little bit of cooling, but that's about it. Some construction lights into that space, and use it for storage at the very least. Every county that I've ever been in has always has insufficient storage.
Is a basement still the cheapest square footage you can build, I assume? Used to
Yes
be
and
that way
no,
on the
I mean,
house.
it is.
I mean, it's a no-brainer on a new home.
Correct.
It's the same way on a commercial building.
For the most part. And I say that just because right now I'm building a basement in Scott County, Indiana, which is southern Indiana. And we ran into unsuitable soils, and now it's becoming the most expensive part of the building that we are.
So you wanna do a little core sampling?
Well, and we did. I mean, we actually ended up doing, we did 2 different geotechnical tests, and we had 2 different geotechnical engineers on the project, because we knew that there was some high water table and gonna need to do dewatering and that kind of stuff, and that's all fine. We got that taken care of. We have water down 2 feet below footing. The problem is that we knew that there were potential for unsuitable soils, but you don't know how much. So the plan is that when we found it, we were gonna undercut, and, well, it ends up that it's more frequent than the test. Unfortunately, you don't do those tests every foot. You do them
Yeah.
10, 20 feet apart, 30 feet apart, and we just ended up finding more than what was anticipated. We found a lot of good soil, but as you can imagine, it's a steel frame building, 3 stories tall, so we've got columns in a lot of places. And this is honestly like, you take a core sample here, and you move over here, and you're getting 2 different soil seams.
That much variation.
There's that much variation, and so, I say that because, one, you're on a restricted site. I think building a basement out in the middle of a residential development or out in the middle of a field is one thing. Doing it with a constrained site is another thing, where you don't want sidewalks and adjacent properties. That all has to be, shored up, and you can't just, you build one for a house, you can
Yeah.
take it back as far as you need typically. On a constrained site, it's a little bit more involved. Certainly think that this is a great opportunity for a basement. I mean, I don't see any reason that we wouldn't plan for that today. And it would be relatively less expensive than the other square footage in the building, assuming that you don't run into, right. So that's where, you see the difference in the total square footage, that's accounted for in the cost versus the roughly 14,000 square feet that's needed for those functions, because we added the basement and put dispatch in there, which isn't one of those functions. So if I have 7,000 square feet for the departments that we know we wanna go over there, split that on 2 levels, and then add a basement under it, that's where you get the square footage that we had for that building. So behind that information, I went through the advantages and disadvantages already. I apologize for jumping out of line on that, but we talked about those. What you see now are the diagrams that describe, we basically had the program, which is the spaces and the numbers. we had kind of the write-up of the options and how that works, but now you can see visually how that would work. So on the first page, which is 71, you see the basement of the bank building. And the red spaces are these shared opportunities that I'm talking about. So when you look at these floor plans, when you look at the amount of red that there is, those are options, that's flexibility for the county. So that shows that any one of these departments can use that space for large group meetings. Outside groups can use that space for large group meetings. So on the basement at the bank, we've got Emergency Services and Disaster Agency, the assessor, Cache River Drainage and County Signs has a space, General Assistance has a space. And when you look at the proposed program, I've got the square footages listed under each of these departments. You can compare between those, you know, what we assign to those departments in the proposed program and what they end up with in this floor plan, and I think you'll see that they're all very close to what was proposed. On the first floor, walk in the front door, you've got a leasable or shared space again. You've got a shared break room of red. Again, you can see multi-purpose space, leasable or shared space, shared break room space. Again, flexibility for the county. County clerk would be inside the door to the left, so that's over where those teller lines are. And then down the corridor to the right, you have an opportunity for Shawnee Development, and the treasurer. And then the commissioners are on that first floor, at the back, where the boardroom is now currently. Upstairs, you again have shared storage and an opportunity for additional county clerk storage, because county clerk can never have enough storage.
As evidenced by my office.
Going back on page 74, you see the opportunity for the basement at the addition to the south side. So you've got shelf space between the existing jail and the basement. You've got your vertical circulation, are the boxes, if you will, at the southwest corner and the northeast corner of the addition. 911 dispatch is the brown area in the basement. And as you can see, you know, nearly 50% of that basement is left over for storage and future opportunity for the county. That's a lot of flexibility for the county built in right there. On the first floor, immediately off of, this is one of the things that we changed, if you remember from the workshop until now. We talked about the county or the circuit court clerk being on the same floor as the court. So here what you see is a lobby space with secure circulation being on the west side of that connector, public circulation being on the east side of that connector, the clerk being in the northeast corner, and then the balance of the space is the courts. So what I can imagine here is the courtrooms would be on the west side of the facility with judges' chambers, jury rooms, and those types of functions being in that southeast corner of the building. Upstairs, on the second floor, space for public defender, state's attorney, and probation department. And again, I think you'll see that, you know, the probation department proposed program calls for 1,900 square feet. The state's attorney's program calls for, I think, 2,541. We have 2,500 there. I shorted you 41 square feet, I apologize, but okay. Right. So it lays out very well, it stacks very well. We get all the functions in there and have the space that we programmatically decided made sense. Now, that's not to say that through the design process, we won't find, again, more opportunities to be more efficient, but from a planning standpoint, everything functions very well in the space that we've allocated. Does anybody have any questions about that option? Just to give you kind of a reference, this shows how that fits on that site. So there's certainly future expansion on the west and north side of the addition that we proposed. And then on the south side, I did some on-site parking, whether that's staff or staff parking or additional public parking. But at the south end of the building, that footprint is future expansion opportunity as well. On page 78, we get into preliminary cost estimates for this option. What we've taken into account of here are site excavation development at the jail site, parking and sidewalks and drives at the jail site, landscaping at the jail site, and utilities. Also demolition at the jail site. From a site standpoint, at the existing bank building, there's not any accounted for, because essentially what you're doing is just moving over into that building and making use of the site as it is. For this option, all of that site work is at the proposed jail site to the south of the jail. We estimate anywhere between $250,000 and $300,000, low and high, for that work. You can see the square footages that were assigned under 3 building justice facility addition. The first floor is that 7,675, that's gross square feet, at $225 a square foot. I would say that that's right in the average of what we're seeing today. Our experiences recently, construction costs have gone up. We're paying on several projects right now about $100 a yard for concrete. Everything is just continues to go up. We're building a jail right now, building 2 jails right now. One we built for about $275 a square foot. 9 months later, and this is a jail again, so it's not exactly apples to apples with this construction, but just to show you, we built essentially the same jail, designed and bid it about 9 months later, and it's about $300 a square foot. So we've seen a pretty significant increase in costs recently. So I think that $225 a square foot, you know, there's the opportunity to make some good decisions to help bring that down. But from a planning standpoint, I think that that's right in the middle. It's not 250, which is really nice finishes, you know, I mean, pretty expensive finishes in some places, but it's not $180 a square foot, which I think gets to the lower end where you're gonna run into some durability problems and those types of things in the long run. Second floor, $200 a square foot for 6,715. So, and the basement, it has dispatch, $285. There's a lot of things that go into dispatch. I've accounted for all of your equipment and all of that stuff in that number. So I don't know if you'd be buying that or moving it separately and already have it paid for.
How would that work?
Like on the radio equipment, or
Yeah, all the disc consoles and everything I've got included in my,
is everything we bought just brand new? We went to,
okay, so that number would go down.
Right.
So we can make that adjustment. So I'm planning for all of the, you still are going to have a more expensive square footage for that area because of the data and the, you know, the IT and the electrical and all of that needs to go into a relatively small square footage. So your cost is gonna be higher on that than just building the basement shell, which you can see is $150 a square foot. And I think that that's right in line. Again, from an average standpoint, you know, you're building houses today for $100 a square foot, but it's a basement, so it's less expensive than $200 a square foot. The Banterra Bank building, I divided it up into heavy, moderate, and light renovation. Heavy renovation is $50 a square foot, so I assigned spaces where I felt like we were doing everything, relocating diffusers. If it had currently had a sink in it that we were gonna be taking out, or adding a sink, or, you know, you're dealing with plumbing, walls, doors, flooring, paint, it kind of ran the gamut. That was $50 a square foot, so still not terribly expensive cost per square foot, but more expensive than the light renovation where maybe we're just replacing the flooring and doing some painting and those types of things, which is $25 a square foot. So that buys you, you know, flooring alone can be in that, you know, $10 to $15 a square foot. So $25 covers mostly finishes. And then for equipment, we've got loose security furnishings. Whenever we get into these projects, there are always things that, again, these are just plug numbers, budget numbers. We don't know all of the answers to this right now, but to not plan on the idea that you're going to have some things in these buildings from a security standpoint that you're gonna wanna buy, I think would not be, you know, I mean, I think it
It'd be
makes it,
foolish not to put it in there.
not to put something in there and say, hey, that number may end up being $40,000, or it may end up being 10,000, but at least we've got 25 in there to plan for. Same goes for office furnishings. You know, you have things furnished right now, but again, to not think that you're going to want to add some conference tables or, you know, replace some furniture, I think at this point, certainly in the planning stages, doesn't make sense. So we've included that. Same thing for appliances. We've got break rooms. You can see I didn't put a lot in there, $4,000. But at least you have a placeholder there for microwaves, refrigerators, those types of things. And then I included some miscellaneous jail equipment supplies. We're connecting to a jail. Again, I don't know that it's going to be a lot, but at least it makes sense to include that money in here from a planning standpoint. I won't go through all of these on every one of the options, but we do include the soft costs that are associated with a project like this. So we've got legal advertising, survey, soils investigation, because we don't want a basement that sensor falls in. Construction document printing, so that's for distribution to all of the contractors. State plan review fees, we went ahead and plugged in $4,000 to $5,000, and maybe less than that. But we don't know until we really understand what the total set of drawings looks like. Architect and engineer, again, just an estimate based on total construction cost. That's certainly not something that's, you know, written in stone. This is how much it would cost to do it. You know, that's something that would be part of a negotiation. Reimbursable expenses. Kevin likes to come over here and stay at the hotel and eat at the buffet, so we gotta pay for him. So we include that in there.
We can put them in the jail over there.
We got our own hotel.
I went ahead and included, you guys may already have a contract with the data communications consultant, but that's somebody for instance, for dispatch 911, you know, make sure that all of the, from a design standpoint, that you have what you need, everything is designed and connected properly. We typically retain one of those, and then typically, again, we just plug a number for special consultants, so that might be on the jail project that I was describing before, in Indiana. We have a geotechnical engineer that we accounted for $4,000 out of the gate for him to do his testing. Run into this, well, guess what, we're spending $10,000 to pay him, not $4,000. So special consultants, we like to put a special pot of money that just says, there are always going to be things that come up on a project, let's account for some money to take care of that. We include design contingencies and construction contingencies. So those are only 5% each, but they do add about $500,000 to the project. You know, very likely that neither one of these would ever be tapped from a design standpoint or from a construction standpoint, but to not plan for it, again, is one of those things that I don't think serves you well today. As you get into the design and you start to refine the design and you start to get more information and you get to the geotechnical report back and you find out you've got perfectly suitable soils and everything's gonna work great, then these can typically be reduced. We might go from 10% down to 5% from the contingency standpoint. I personally don't like to do that. I like the idea of knowing that you got what you need, and if you ever run into any issues during construction, you've got it taken care of. But point being is, as you get more refined, as you add detail, as you layer information, contingencies can come down. We included some financing costs on here. Obviously, without working with a financial, I don't know who the county uses. We work with quite a bit. There's a lot of different ones out there, but without working with them yet, we just put some numbers in here again to cover. This is all based on experience, typical projects, recent projects, but went ahead and included what those costs might be, certainly in the short term, front end of the project. And so the soft cost summary is right around 1.2 to 1.3 million. Total project costs is right at 6.2 to 7 is the range for that option. Anybody have any questions on that? Option B was to renovate and construct a new addition at the Banterra Bank Building. So again, we went through the space program and we said, okay, what if we tried to fit everything that we have in this building up at the bank building? That would require 29,438 gross square feet, and the existing bank building is 20,890. So we know that not everything is going to fit at the size that we want in that building. And so what we did was we worked through an option, and this was presented at the workshop, where there were some spaces that we didn't make as big as the proposed program called for, but did do a 3,500 square foot addition to the west side of the building. And so what I say in the front end of this is, in order for this option to be viable, some areas may require compromises. In the following planning diagram, emergency services and disaster agency, circuit court, commissioner's room, and general assistance are undersized relative to their planning square footages. Several other spaces meet the suggested net square footages requirements, but not the gross square footage requirements. So this suggests that the spaces need to be designed very efficiently with as few walls, chases as possible, and internal circulation should be kept to a minimum. While these spaces are smaller than the proposed space program suggests, it is a viable option to meet the needs of the county today. However, off-site storage can be expected for old files. In the long term, any growth within any department would be challenging. So what this says is this, we think we can make it work, but you are gonna be packed to the walls. I mean, you're gonna be really fitting tightly into that building. You're really gonna essentially be creating, I think, a similar circumstance to what you have here, where people aren't functioning exactly like they would want to, having, you know, storage space that's probably remote from their location, which is one of the challenges you have here, utilizing the jail up on the roof. The bank building, you know, has an opportunity to house everything that's in this building over there. But I think that it creates a lot of challenges. I think that you put yourself in a situation where, because of the amount of staff and public that you're putting into that building, the potential exists that you could start wearing through that building pretty quickly. It's not made out of marble, it's not made out of, you know, so your finishes inside, I think we wanna be smart about what we do, you know, I mean, corner guards, bump rails, everything we can do to kind of minimize the wear and tear on that building would be ideal, because while it's a very nice building, it has a very soft interior. And by soft, I mean, it's not like these good old, you know, old buildings that are marble and tile and, you know, bunch of heavy materials that are nice and durable and stand up to wear and tear. So we would need to do some improvements on that building to do that. Some advantages of that option are all the county functions would be in one location. Some of the space in the Banterra Bank building is move-in ready. I think for this option, that would be less so than on the other option where we have more flexibility. But it certainly is something that can be taken into account. The facility could be adapted to be somewhat public friendly with secure circulation separated from public circulation. So when we look at the plan, you'll see we look at the opportunity for there to be a sally port on the north side of that building. Inmates can be brought in, dropped off and brought in there, circulate immediately downstairs to where the judicial processes are. The new construction can be built energy efficient, and the existing building is newer construction that is likely energy efficient. Security would only be required at one location, so again, that's an advantage. Disadvantages, parking immediately adjacent could be limited. Certainly if we build out to the west side, you have all of that parking on the south side. I think that there would be a need for some additional parking, so we would want to explore that further, I think, if this option is a desired option. New location for services and government functions that the public is not used to. Again, it's just change. That's always a challenge for a lot of municipalities and their constituents. Inmates would need to be transported a significant distance from the jail for court appearances. Right now, they walk across the street. With the first option, they would circulate within the same building. In this option, you're driving them a few blocks away. So it's a different challenge, I think, and a decision that county would need to make a decision about whether or not the time and cost of transporting inmates, makes sense. The site does not offer additional opportunities for expansion. I think that if you build out to the west side of that, you end up in a pretty constrained situation. There's not any opportunity to the north, I don't think. You're pretty well up against that road. To the south, there's some parking lot there, but again, then you're replacing parking lot with building, and, what do? You run into the parking challenges at that point. Some departments would be immediately undersized. Again, you're starting out day one with no flexibility, with no opportunity for growth. I think that's a huge disadvantage with this option. Court functions would be in the basement, so again, circulation, future flexibility, you're really kind of constraining yourself with this option. Services frequented by the public would be on the second floor, so in this option, we talked about putting some things upstairs. We had feedback during the work session that that would not be ideal for the people that visit them. There is an elevator, so that helps, but walking in and circulating up for departments that have a high number of visitors, isn't always the ideal situation. But I don't think, based on the square footage that's available on the first floor, putting them in place of, the treasurer or clerk makes sense either. So that was the best place in this building for their location. It's just not ideal for their needs. So we showed diagrammatically how this space would work and what would be accounted for. Again, you can look at the proposed program and the square footages that are assigned in each of these spaces, and be able to compare. There is an opportunity to do a basement addition, again, 3,500 square feet under the new construction. The flexibility associated with that, you could do one of two things. One, you could upsize some of these spaces in the basement so the court could get a little bit larger. Emergency Services and Disaster Agency, which is undersized out of the gate, could be in this addition, and that could be accounted for. But we did not account for the basement addition right out of the gate on this option.
If you did do that, wouldn't you mess up your circulation when they cut that circuit clerk's office?
Yeah, it would just mean that you were gonna, reconfigure this a little bit. This becomes, storage, this becomes a little bit longer like that, and then this becomes something else. But it's certainly an opportunity there, but adding space and money is not hard to do, but it doesn't always make the most sense from a planning standpoint to just keep throwing additional space on there. I think it was important in this option to kind of gauge, here's what you've got, here's the addition you can do on the first floor to the west end. If it makes sense to add that basement, we know roughly what that cost per square foot is. It's easy to account for, but to just continue to throw square footage at things, I didn't think made good sense. I thought it made sense to say, what is the viable option at this facility as it is today with an addition on the first floor. And if you notice, this addition is out where that existing canopy is. So again, diagram shows how these might lay out. You've got the frequented county offices on the west end there, right off of the main circulation. There are some shared spaces here, multi-purpose room, shared break room. I included some document scanning space, commissioner's room, and then you've got public defender, state's attorney, and probation all on the east end of the first floor. Upstairs, you can see general assistance and Shawnee development. Those are the ones that I was speaking to just a minute ago. Cost estimate,
That's on the top. I didn't think if you had a second exit, you could put people on the top there, the building, you can.
you can on the second floor. Yeah, if you don't have what, I'm sorry?
I thought we talked about something about,
There's only one way in and one way out. Is that not a problem?
There's things that we would probably have to do from a exiting egress distance standpoint, so sprinklering the exit may be something that we have to include on that. It really comes down to occupancy type and square footage, and we're within that on this option. The site improvements, so you see some very exact same headings as was on the previous estimate. The square footage, the footprint of the addition is smaller, so the site improvements are less. The building addition, 3,500 square feet. I included the basement there at $150 a square foot, so that's shelled space. That's first floor at $175 a square foot. So again, not going for the most expensive construction. We've got a fire station under construction right now, which is a wood frame building. Nice finishes, not extravagant by any means. Pretty typical construction, I would say, with a few bells and whistles that you might expect in a government building. So I think that that's a good measure, and we're right at $175 a square foot on that building. Can it be done for less? Absolutely. Could it cost more? Absolutely. Hopefully a good project. You never, you like to think that you've got it dialed in and you know exactly where things are gonna come out, but that's not always the case. So this is a good average, I think, of where it could end up. The bank building, heavy renovation, moderate renovation, light renovation, again, those numbers stayed the same in terms of $50 a square foot, 35 and 25. We've included the same furnishings as we did in the other. And we've got a cost, overall cost, same soft costs, and then a total project cost estimate of around 2.2 to 2.5 million for that addition.
On that modern cost, why is it 9,000 square feet there?
As opposed to,
Well, I just didn't know, I mean, you're saying 9,000 square foot of it would be at $35.
yeah, and mostly, I mean, again, because when you're putting court functions into that, I mean, there are a lot of things that go into court functions. I mean, the IT and everything is not the least of which, but again, we are, when you're leaving square footage behind, so on that first option, where you don't need the whole building to fit the functions you're trying to fit in there, you have a lot of flexibility. You can put things where they make the most sense to put them and make use of the existing building, I think, better in its existing condition. Whereas in this case, we gotta get things to fit in there, we're packing it full and adding on. And so the number of spaces that have to be touched or modified goes up, I think, significantly in that
Yeah, I was
option.
just looking at the difference in, what it was with the previous one. I mean, it's a double,
And that's why, I mean, that's the justification. What I can do is I have these marked out where those light, moderate, and heavy areas are, and I can show you why.
Yeah, because the monitor went from 175,000 if we just moved there to 317,000 if we have to make adjustments. So,
Well, just as a for instance, so if you wanna look between these two options at what makes, what has an impact, let me grab this real quick.
yeah, on page 78 and 85.
Yeah, and let's look at it graphically, for instance. So if you go to the first floor, so just as a for instance, if you look at page 72 and 83, okay, so on 72, if you look at the leasable or shared space, those are two existing offices at the front of the building. I don't have to do anything to those are just staying as is. If you look at Shawnee Development, there's a series of offices along the south side of the building there. I don't have to do much to that. For the treasurer's space on the north side of the building, those are existing offices. I don't have to do a whole lot to that. For the commissioner's room, there's some connection here that's not perfect, but for the most part, that can stay as is. The county clerk bleeding over into the circulation space, as you know, the teller stations are here, so there's moderate renovation here, and then kind of heavy renovation at this edge, because we're gonna wanna divide that off, with a wall at that edge. But if you go down to this now, I've got a corridor going through where those teller stations was. That's heavy renovation. I gotta put a wall up where those teller stations are. That's heavy renovation. I'm converting this, which is existing corridor, into part of their space. That's heavy renovation. This is not congruent space now, so that's more moderate renovation. This stays about the same. This is, putting a wall across here, that's pretty, so the extent to which I impact the existing facility is greater in this option than it is in this option. And that's what accounts for the differences in the square footages that are impacted, and we could go to the basement and do the same thing. Trying to shoehorn the court into utilizing some of these spaces, this is great. I mean, this would work well. This is nice, big and open. Converting this into judges' chambers and some of those functions back here. The circuit court clerk, some aspects of this work well, some don't. Emergency services and disaster agency here requires a little bit more work than the other option as well. So that's why there is a difference, is we're trying to fit more stuff into
Very limited space.
very limited space, and so the amount of things that you're gonna have to touch goes up.
It's a boxing right there.
I know it.
I keep
Kicked it
thinking,
back and forth like soccer ball.
I keep thinking I'm hitting Eric's foot, and I realize now it's a box.
I mean, I don't know what y'all got going on.
Option C,
What page?
87. Option C, renovation, restoration of existing courthouse. Option C proposes keeping all the current functions in the existing courthouse and renovating the facility. The facility consists of approximately 25,000 gross square feet. The square footage that was adjusted to accommodate the needs of departments is 22,645. So the net square footage, the net square footage of the facility is 19,156. Our adjusted, proposed program, was 22,645. So the building, if we're planning perfectly for everything that's in this building, we're about 3,500 net square feet less than desired. With this in mind, some adjustments can be made in the courthouse. First, the Emergency Services and Disaster Agency can move into the space currently occupied general assistance. That does a couple things. One, there's a break room in there, so that 24-hour, 48-hour break room, if you will, quiet room, would be available for their use in emergency situation. Expands their office needs, so from a from a conference room standpoint, from an office space standpoint, that may be better suited for emergency services. General assistance can move into the space currently occupied by emergency services. Also, we talked about the circuit court clerk moving into the space currently occupied by the treasurer. That gives them kind of that back of house circulation with access to the court. So that helps, I think, from a functionality standpoint on the courthouse. There are several construction modifications that can be made to improve the functionality of several departments. In the basement, the office configuration in the assessor's office could be modified so that one does not have to circulate through one office in order to enter another. The area currently occupied by Shawnee Development can be modified to better suit their needs too, again by including circulation paths in a waiting area. Frequently out there, you'll see people sitting outside of that space waiting to go in. On the first floor, public circulation pattern could be changed so that there are clear entrances and exits from departments. So again, we've talked about in some of these departments at certain times of the year, you've got everybody trying to come in and everybody trying to come out through the same door. So we could look at how to improve that functionality. We talked about commissioners might consider having regular meetings in the small courtroom and then use their current space for office functions. There are desired attorney-client meeting spaces that can't necessarily be accommodated without modifying the existing courtroom spaces, which I think everybody agrees function very well. So I don't know that that's something that carving out that space is gonna be very feasible in this existing facility. That being said, There are some opportunities with the state's attorney's law library, or I guess the law library. It might be subdivided to create a shared conference room. The law library would have to obviously be smaller, but it does provide an opportunity for some of those departments up there to share a conference space. And then the law library itself, if needed, could be utilized as a shared conference space, as it is now from time to time. Jury rooms and jury restrooms and those types of things, I think that there's a huge opportunity for improvement on those.
Tell the judge what page you're on.
87.
You on 87
Pardon?
page?
Page 87. Get you up to speed.
All
here.
right.
The physical issues with this facility described earlier in the report are significant and need to be addressed for long-term use of the facility. The water infiltration issues will continue to cause damage to the interior finishes and weaken the exterior finishes. Every freeze-thaw cycle, there's a potential that you're gonna continue to fall masonry off the building, which in turn allows more air and water infiltration into the building, gets back behind the walls. Every freeze-thaw cycle continues to worsen, so has the opportunity to continue to worsen. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems are in many ways continuing to degrade. I think that you guys do a great job of keeping up with it, but it's gotten to a point that as part of a renovation project, we would probably look at replacing those systems entirely, and that's the way we approached it for this study. So that includes mechanical, electrical, and plumbing on all of those. All the windows, full exterior tuck pointing, replacement of some masonry where we've had severe spalling, would all be updated. And then the comfort levels, from a mechanical standpoint, we've kind of covered that, but doing things with newer systems, more energy efficient systems, obviously is a huge opportunity for the county. But then comfort levels for staff within the facility, I think, is another big thing that can be addressed. Advantages, all the county functions would be at the same location they've always been, which again, from a public standpoint, is very desirable. The facility could be adapted to be somewhat public friendly with secure circulation being separated from public circulation. We talked about that on the, would it be west end, coming in over here to circulate through rather than the front. We can make improvements back there as part of the renovation to make that more desirable for the sheriff and jail staff. Security would only be required at one location. The facility can continue to serve as a storm shelter. An updated renovated courthouse can continue to serve as a backdrop for tourism. The county services and functions would continue to operate out of one facility, so there's a convenience factor. The existing courthouse provides proper courtroom architecture. I mean, it's hard to beat walking up into that large courtroom and looking around. I mean, it just feels right from a courtroom standpoint, and I think there's something to be said for that. It is immediately adjacent to the jail, so again, it's proximity for bringing inmates back and forth. Maybe not as ideal as being connected to the jail, but it is close to the jail. Disadvantages. Construction remodel would be difficult on the users and departments. It's existing building, difficult to figure out. I mean, we would have to work very closely with the contractor and work through phasing, and figure out how to get people shuffled around and maybe how to utilize some other spaces for a period of time while things are renovated in this building. There's a lot of material that would have to be removed, and you're trying to do that while you're bringing people in and out for day-to-day business. It can be a challenge. Certainly wouldn't be the first place it's ever been done. It's done all the time. It's not easy to figure out, but it is a possible scenario, very possible scenario. There is not good separation of inmates and the public. They come in the front door. Well, we kind of address that with, is there a way to make some renovations in the back to make accessibility on the north side of the building, or the west side of the building, even better. Inmate circulation and tourism. Inmates are walking around the square while visitors are present. Even with new systems upgrades and an envelope and renovation, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems may not be as efficient as new construction. It's just because it's an old building. You're routing and where you have access to these systems and how you have to kind of weave and wind all these new systems through the building is not always the most efficient manner. And therefore, the systems aren't always quite as efficient as they are in new construction, but pretty close. It wouldn't be a huge difference. There is not an opportunity for expansion on this site. You know, you're relatively built out on the square. You're dealing with an older facility. It's not to say that you can't do some expansion on this site, but the opportunities are limited just because of the design of the courthouse. There's no opportunity for more storage on this site. You'd have to look at off-site storage. Not all these desired spaces can be accommodated. So again, we're a little short on the the net square footage that was desired in the proposed program. But we can make some adjustments and feel like we can still be very successful in this building with a full renovation. Looking at cost to renovate, and again, the drawings are relatively similar. There were just those couple adjustments that were shown with emergency services and general assistance. Everybody else pretty much stays in the same place with the exception of on the first floor, moving the treasurer and circuit court clerk. We are in the process of working on a courthouse in Okaloosa County, Florida. I realize it's Florida and it's not Massac County, Illinois. That being said, the renovation is very comparable to what we would be talking about here. The problems that the challenges that they faced with their courthouse are very similar to what you have here. It was all systems, energy efficiency, windows, finishes on the exterior. The inside of your facility is great. I mean, you've got good durable floors throughout the building. Yeah, are there places where we need to patch and paint and that type of stuff? Yeah, but that's typical of every courthouse that's 70, 100 years old. But we ended up right at $100 a square foot, $160 a square foot on that project. And I ran my numbers on this one, and I was coming out right at $160 a square foot. So I feel like I've got an existing project that has been bid, and it's at $160 a square foot, and I ran my numbers, and I'm right at that number. So I assigned that to the gross square footage number, which is the 9375. So that gets us to the outside of the walls for the entire facility and the existing jail. And I put in a phasing extended construction factor in there because you're gonna be living in the building. So to not account for some phasing or extended construction, again, I think would, in the planning stages, would not serve you well to not do that. Exterior accessibility, you know, are there ways to improve accessibility? We have the ramp outside. You guys may say that works fine, we don't need to do anything with it, but again, to not plan for doing something with that right now, I think, you know, it makes sense to include it. So with that being said, all of that plus the soft costs, we're right at 6.3 to 7.1 million on a full renovation project of this, with, you know, right around $1 million of that being just your soft costs. So that's your legal, professional, capitalized interest, design contingencies, and all of that. And again, we have almost $500,000 in design and construction contingencies included in there. So there's good money from a planning standpoint included in there that I think there are opportunities to look at this 10 different ways during the design process and, you know, move these numbers up a little, down a little bit based on your specific wants and needs. And in the appendix, we've got a bunch of the documents that we used and the PowerPoint that we presented at the work group meeting. Do you have any questions about that?
You got any of
Lots of info.
I think we're gonna take some time to digest it.
Yeah,
And the public needs to digest a lot too.
yeah, and I think that that's what, you know,
That may be where the questions come in, or it should be, in my opinion.
and I think it's important too to think of this document as kind of a compilation of the facts, the interviews, you know, all of the information that we could gather in one place. And it really becomes kind of a tool, it becomes a baseline for things to be discussed. So there are things that people can say, we really don't like that at all, or we do like that a lot, and it becomes, but did you think about doing this? I mean, those are all things that we can continue to be engaged in and help the county modify what you have here. Again, this can serve as a tool, as a baseline, it's a way to bounce discussion around and make decisions. But certainly not something that, this is done, let's etch it in stone and set it aside. I mean, that's not what, I think that this can serve as an opportunity to continue to be modified and updated, and we will do that, and reprint and send them back. So if there's something that you wanna look at, some modification that you wanna make, you know, some additional option that you wanna consider, or some altered option, you may say, we like the idea of, utilizing the existing courthouse, but wanna look at it in a more detailed phased approach. How would we do that? We could come down and do that work for you, add it to the study in the appropriate spot, and that becomes part of the document. So this is a living document to some degree, and not just something where it's like, okay, got that, throw it on the shelf, it's etched in stone, it's not.
And I think there's some areas maybe we think the Justice Center is a little bit too big. I mean, I think it's an accurate size that we need.
I do.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that through additional study and things that, you know, we wanna work through there. And I mean, the nice thing is, again, you can go into the, any one of the departments in the proposed program and look at why we have the square footage in there that we do.
It looks like it was sort of 13,833, plus the 911's 2,580, which gives us 16,413, and I think the center's what, 23,000 square foot. So we do have, I don't know, maybe 6,600 extra square foot.
Well, and that's what I was talking about before, was that, you know, you don't have to build the basement. Or you could build the basement and put those functions that we have on the second floor, split them up between the basement, the first floor, and be done right there. The problem is that you're done, you have no flexibility, and you don't have any additional space. So yes, absolutely, I mean, if you say, I'll tell you what, show us how we would build it right to the number that program says we need, and don't provide for any future flexibility or anything, we'll build that 15 years from now if we know it, then that's something that we can make an adjustment on, and I can have that back to you, you know, by the end of the week.
And then Banterra Bank, the way I look at it, we have 20,890. We need, what, 15,603, so we have a lot of room to grow there.
With the option, if you use the option of building an additional.
Right.
Yep.
If not,
Justice Center.
If not, we're, be
We're
really
packed in
tight.
like sardines down there.
And, actually, a lot of our costs go up because of just the heavier renovations instead of mild or moderate renovations.
If you start packing things in there, absolutely. The thing that, the way that I approached the addition on the south side of the jail was I said, on the first floor, court functions, circuit court clerk, is this square footage, and there's gotta be some circulation included in that, which there is with the 1.3 factor. On the second floor, you've got probation, public defender, and state's attorney. And those all stacked very nicely. If you look at the square footages that are required by those departments and the square footage that I have accounted for in the diagrams, between those two floors, they fit perfectly. I mean, that's as good, I mean, that's as right at the desired square footage as what we built for those two floors. Well, if I add one more thing and it needs to go in the basement, does it not make sense just to add it to the bottom and then leave the balance of that space as shell? I think it does, but that doesn't mean that what we, you know, the other option would be to look at putting more things on the first floor and then adding, for instance, like public defender and probation in the basement with dispatch. And then the first floor would be state's attorney, circuit court clerk, and courts. So there's, you know, there's unlimited ways of kind of rearranging spaces and making them stack different ways. But doing just a full basement, slightly larger full basement, and slightly larger first floor, and that's it, is going to be less expensive, absolutely. But from a planning standpoint, is that the best place to start, or
I don't think
is?
so. That's my opinion. You don't ever build a building for today. From experience in the business,
Yep.
you can't build a building big enough. You'll fill it up.
Yep.
Well, that's what, and quite honestly, when the first floor and the second floor stacked the way they did, and they worked out really nicely, and we had the functions we wanted together on the second floor, functions we wanted together on the first floor, then we know we wanna do dispatch in the basement, and I see that there's, half of the basement is left over for shell, and I look at, how you guys utilize the jail on top of this building, and you look, I can imagine a week into using that building, everybody will have their
Oh,
areas
I want this
divided.
space, I want this space, yeah.
Right, that's why when it worked out that way, I left it that way. I said, okay, that's the way, that makes sense, because they have that need. Just looking around where people, every single space in this building that you guys can store stuff is taken up with storage, so here you've got a nice, brand new, wide open space that you can subdivide however you want. You could put up chain link fence in there and call it, make 10 different little storage units in there and say, that's yours, that's yours, that's yours, and just give everybody space to store stuff. It just never, I have yet to work in a county where, storage isn't a huge issue or factor, and it's always kind of one of those things that ends up being the last thing talked about. All of the office spaces, all the functional spaces are what gets heavily planned for, and then it's kinda like, well, if we got a closet left over, we'll use it, but, that honestly is one of the things that I think needs to be right out there as important as anything else, because what you end up with is,
A cluttered up junk mess.
and really difficult to access. It's never like in the best spot. It's always, not that I've ever been anywhere that's got the jail on top of the courthouse, but it's always someplace like that. It's always this out of the way kind of place that's, it's a pain in the butt to get to, and it's never in that optimal place where people can just walk across the hall, get in there, find that file from 60 years ago and, bring it back. So, anyway.
Judge, do you have any questions?
Okay, well, again, really appreciate the opportunity. We'll stay in touch, obviously, as you wanna have things modified, expanded. We do that all the time. So don't think that just because we came here and met with you and dropped it off that, we're not in a position to make adjustments on this. And we can even do that, as a separate thing in the back, so that everything that's done after the original report is kept in an appendix.
If we decide to, some type of public meeting or something, would you all be interested in coming back and helping us with that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was wanting to ask you, if you do something like that, try to let us know if we put it on our calendar. I know I can come, but I wanna make sure Eric can too.
Well, and what we'd like to do in that case is we would bring in we'd bring a projector. Obviously this would all be at your, we'd talk to you about what you want us to do, but I think what helps in those, we've done several of these kind of public outreach, if you will. And what we do is, based on your feedback, is bring in a, projector screen and some graphics and, maybe not all of the detail, but some bigger points and some of the graphics to show how things might be utilized in this option, and use it as a, again, just a discussion point to get the conversation started and talk about why you might think that's a good opportunity that everybody should think about. And then we provide them background on projects that we've worked on like it and why it'll work well, and et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hey,
Yeah.
You ready for Patrick to start talking, or you wanna write for a second?
No, let her re-up, I'll catch up.
The first thing I had was a resolution for the appellate prosecutor. I think we,
That's this one, right?
right.
Have we already had a motion or anything, or what do we need to do?
We discussed it 2 weeks ago, but we put it on the agenda last week, and I think I forgot to bring it up when I was here. So it's on for today.
Okay. You guys remember all that? Or do you wanna look at it? Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, want me to sign right there? See here. What day is today? 10?
The team.
I think that's what it needs to be in there, doesn't it? Or that one right there, for that matter, does it? Only this?
Right, and then I'll submit that to Juanita after. I guess John can sign that, and we'll send it over. That's okay. The other issue I had related to the hot water heaters. My understanding is, we're ready to move forward with the proposal from N&N Plumbing, is that?
As far as I know. Should we put that in motion or something, or how do we go about that?
Well, that's a couple things related to that. I spoke with Bill Nutty about an addendum to his proposal, which I call the contract addendum, to add some language that he'd be required, of course, to pay prevailing wage, which is required by law, and that the project completion date be no later rather than January 10th, 2015. And then the performance and payment bond will be made in our bid notice that we sent out. So what I would need is a motion to approve the proposal, and I can give you a copy of this memorandum, that way you can see it before you vote on it.
You met last Monday, didn't you?
Yes.
Sure,
I'm sorry.
do we need a motion?
If we get a motion to approve the proposal and contract addendum.
We can do that in one motion, can't we?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, right here, correct.
That's correct. There's a place that you can sign there too, that proposal.
Which one do you want?
That's the top one, let John sign.
Patrick, did he act like he could start right away?
He did. He didn't give any specifics on that, but he felt like that the time we'd come up with, January 10th, wouldn't be an issue. That was basically 60 days from
Yeah.
today. So he thought it'd be done before that, but obviously it'll have to January 10th to get it done.
Do I just under Jeff?
That'd be great if you could, and David too.
Patrick, this, somebody, will have to insulate those pipes, because he'll wear them down.
I would assume so, being as
The,
he,
ADA, you know, when they come up there with a wheelchair, they gotta be insulated and they keep from burning their knees, you know.
correct,
And I don't know if that's his scope of work, but somebody's gonna do it, you know.
right. And then there was the issue that we discussed about the grant from DECO last week. Gerald's provided me information I'm gonna follow up on. Hopefully that will resolve any issues we have. The only thing maybe, John, you know those documents that I mentioned to you, I may still have to get
Yeah.
some copies of those.
Yeah, I'll be looking for them.
Great.
It's, things sort of calmed down this week.
Just a little bit, huh?
Patrick, I have more information at home, and the treasurer has the canceled checks and all, I've got them from her before. So
Okay.
I may have copies, but,
But I can get that from Dana.
yeah. Yeah, she does that.
Well, hopefully after I speak with Ms. Rudolph, that will,
Well,
Roll on with
actually,
the result.
Patrick, I think she has took another job, out on the state, or maybe someone else.
that could be what.
Seemed like
the issue
maybe,
is.
you may have saw in that one email where there's no baby yet, did you see that
Right.
one? I mean, her daughter didn't have a kid, and her and the wife got to be good friends. And left me bum out.
You'll be in the loop when you need to be.
Yeah.
That's right.
They may need a crib put together.
That's right.
Anything else for me?
I don't know, unless you wanna sit in with Chad.
I don't mind too.
Sure.
Come on up, bud.
Trade places.
Well, I'm here regarding our Massac County Enterprise Zone. And I've been given the task of getting the resolutions before the different taxing bodies for the property tax abatement, property tax abatement in the Massac County Enterprise Zone. Now this isn't, there's 4 parties in the current Enterprise Zone application, Brookport, Joppa, Massac County, and Metropolis. Next month, it is my understanding that there will be the final ordinances passed. And in those ordinances, those will be the abatements from each of those governing bodies. So, City of Metropolis tax, any tax imposed by Joppa or Brookport, and then, of course, the county tax. I'm here on regards of people like the Massac County Hospital, the Highway Department, Fire District, Shawnee College, Massac Unit 1, Joppa Maple Grove, and particularly here, hopefully, at least the Highway Department, but possibly the Fire District. I didn't know if the Fire District had their own board that met, and if so, I need to get that in front of them so they can approve their resolution. But do you guys at least approve the highway, the abatement of the highway taxes, the county highway road tax? Okay. Then I have a resolution that we're asking be approved and signed. Who's-
Get it once.
Okay.
May not hurt.
And it's
I mean,
basically,
it should be the
it's the
same,
same as
yeah.
the one that's been signed for the current zone. And, right now, I'm getting the well, last week we did our intergovernmental agreement. I've got everybody's, tonight I'll get, Metropolis intergovernmental agreement. Brookport's hopefully tonight or tomorrow, depending on when they meet for holiday this week. And then trying to get, our taxing districts to agree to the abatement. So when somebody does a project, it's 100%, we just abate all their taxes.
Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I make the motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Chief Mike Childers, I was gonna give you his cell phone number if you want.
Is that who would be, okay, that'd be great, yeah.
And then you can find out when they meet. I don't know what the date is exactly.
Okay, do you know?
Yeah, his cell number is 638-6276. You can just contact him, I'm sure he can tell you the next meeting. It's Mike Childers.
least the end of this year to qualify for the zones that are gonna become available in 2016.
The sooner you got your information in, it helps your chances.
Right, I think the deadline to qualify for one of the zones that expire in 2016, the deadline is to have your application in by December 31st, at the end of this year, before January.
What all do I need to fill out?
It'll take them about a year to go through the applications, and we're hoping to have the brand new zone, if everything goes well,
Type that in, or what's?
January 1st, 2016. So our current zone goes away, and we're just operating under the new one for 15 years.
You said this is for the highway district.
This would be for the highway district, yes. Yes.
So we probably want to put, I don't know if you want to type it in, the name of the district you want to include it, or if you want us to write it in.
Either way, I can do
So
it.
Is there, will Massac County Highway Department work, or is there, since we have unit districts and all that different things, do we need,
I would believe that the highway department
would cover all that?
Cover it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have unit road district, which basically is a sort of a separate taxing entity, but you guys can,
John, do you think it'd be better if we had two separate resolutions, one for?
actually, the way that levy works, I break out the unit road district tax fund, but like, county highway and everything is just in our regular tax levy.
Okay,
Does that make any sense?
It does.
Okay.
so you think the one resolution would be
Yes.
sufficient?
So you're gonna have him type in what he needs here? Other than, let's see. I need to sign right here.
I think John would fill that out.
Oh, okay.
Because he's gonna certify.
Oh,
that
he's
it-
sealing it,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, because he'll take the seal.
So I should be done then, shouldn't I?
Right. I could probably wanna just give that to John and.
Yeah, let him do it.
Thank you very much.
Chad.
Thank you, Tim.
Like I said, next month,
Chad will need a copy of this though, correct?
Right, once we get it all, we got it signed, we'll get it sealed and delivered.
that'll work. Next month, I'll have the final ordinances, like I said, I'll just send her some copies.
Okay.
I'll get them to you as soon as I can. Everybody can sign up on them. Give them away.
Let me have that.
Get it today, tomorrow, I can get it.
Yeah, tomorrow probably better. We can get
Or
it.
Wednesday, we're off tomorrow, I'll be by Wednesday or something. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chad, have a great day.
You too.
General fund, or do we?
As far as I know, it's.
Okay, I was just curious.
Stays, yes.
As long as we don't burn it up for him, we won't have to deal with that, do we?
Do they know that Glenn passed away?
I didn't know that.
Glenn's passed away this morning, they said.
I didn't hear that.
42? 42? He was 42, or was that a different fella?
No, he was like 72 or 3.
Okay, well, I'm all confused, cause somebody was talking about being 42 down there.
Well, that was Sonny Wilson.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
that was
Sonny.
the city
Oh, yeah.
employee.
Yeah, he was around my age, or whether.
He was, I think, already.
Yeah, and he's about 43, 44.
Yeah.
Where was Glenn? Was he in the hospital? or-
No, he was at home with, I think hospice was coming for the past month.
Oh. His heart condition. Yeah.
Other than that, I don't have anything. Some bills I'll bring back here and see if I get them filled out.
Thanks for guess.
Just this morning, he passed away.
I think around 3. Marilyn had called me at 6. So I knew when I saw her name on my phone that, you know.
Wasn't good. How long have you, how long's it been retired? It's been 2 years?
2 years.
Ian? Two.
2 years. You just never know. You know, you hear so many people, they retire and like a year later, they're,
Yep.
Well, John, let's hope that doesn't
Let's-
have to be.
I mean, oh my gosh, yeah, John, no.
you in your early sixties.
62.
Yeah.
You're good for another
Oh,
40 years.
yeah, that's you.
Yeah. Taylor boys aren't known for longevity, though.
But see, the key is you do crosswords.
Yeah, that's what you
Yeah.
mean.
That's the key.
Keeps them young.
Well, Joe, you ready?
I'm ready, I'm pretty quiet today, I don't really have much to say.
No news is good news.
Plugging along, doing the brush cut, doing
Knocking down trees.
clearing, yeah. Nothing real exciting.
All the equipment running good?
Yeah.
Can you make it?
Little things here and there. Still talking about possibly trading up in the world on excavators sometimes, and haven't really pursued anything yet.
You can get about, how many different brands are there? You can demo one of each anyhow for, 1,000 hours or something.
There's a bunch of them out there. I saw one named Congo or something like that.
Never heard of that.
It looked a nice looking machine.
Cabelco?
No?
Congo.
Yeah.
That's in the jungle, isn't it Congo, isn't it?
Sound like
Where
that.
they live?
That didn't make the plan, I'm not sure.
One interesting thing that I saw last week, just FYI, it's nothing we could do about it, I don't guess, but we put some rock down on a road last year because it was muddy and bad. Somebody stole all the rock,
Is it, like,
white rock,
picked it up with a loader, or,
I guess. It's gone.
I mean, you
Because the road is-
tailgated it out, hadn't you?
I mean, we graded it. I mean, we went up there and it's the road, the reason why I noticed is, I mean, it's not a real well-traveled road. Went back there and, was looking at some signs and stuff, and, the road was just so muddy, it was just bad muddy. And I'm just like, where's that rock that we put here last year? And it was gone.
Was that
I mean, that's just what we
the
had to
road
do.
going back there, that gas company?
Is that Shady Loop Road, that little loop that goes right around Bowes Road from Grand Chain to Grand Chain, on the south side of,
Glenn Barnett, is that, go to his,
I don't know who lives on it. But I just, it's FYI, just think
Would you notice any gravel in someone else's driveway?
It looks like they'd have to pick up, they gonna have to pick up a bunch of dirt just to be, I mean,
they had to pick it up with a backhoe or bucket or a loader or something.
a front end loader, I mean, it looked to me like it had it gouged up. Unless they was awful careful.
Oh, the road was bad, I mean, it was muddy, I mean, because there
You
was.
reckon they bladed it up in the windrow to pick it up, or how in the world would you pick rock up without getting a bunch of
I don't
dirt
see
in
how
it?
nobody called. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
If it, is he
Well, that
still
road
out?
I'm talking about, there's not but about 3 people live on, maybe 2.
Is that the road Glenn Barnett lives on?
Yep, I bet it is. Comes off Bowles Road, then comes back out.
It comes off of Grand Chain Road right
Uh-huh.
east of Bowes Road and then circles right up on top of the hill and comes down on Grand Chain again on the west part of Bowes Road.
Yeah, this would be.
That's right up in his neck of the woods.
Yeah. I don't think he's got a tractor, does he?
I don't have any idea. Is he calmed down any?
Not much, I took some concrete. He's still ready to hang.
He feeling all right then. Joe, you probably never had to deal with him, have you?
No, I don't even know the man. I just thought.
Have you ever been out there, Sheriff?
I get along good with him.
Yeah, Joe, I can introduce you to him sometime.
You're all right.
I'm sure I'll need long someday.
Don't let Gerald trick you into that one.
I'm I've been starting to look at some of the signs, and it's amazing how many signs are gone too. I don't know, I'm assuming there used to be signs in these places where I'm talking about, but there's a lot of stop signs that are gone. And there's people that I've noticed pulling weight limit signs off bridges, popping guardrails off bridges. It's all done.
They do that weight limit, so they not responsive.
Is it for scrap? Do they use that?
I don't know what they do with a guardrail unless they're,
No, they're not taking it, they're just popping it off the bridge. I'm assuming so they can cross a bridge, maybe, or something that is in the way, or I don't know.
Can't get the header up probably, but go over.
Well, we've had several in the last couple of weeks, we've had, not one guardrail situation, but several signs that's gone, popped out.
where was the guardrail?
This one was up on, I believe, somewhere just north, like Hayes Road or Upper Salem Road.
Well, Hayes Road, that one there was fixed so they could take it off and on, I think. At one time, the guys fixed that where it could be bolted up pretty easy.
Oh, well,
I don't know.
whoever takes it off, don't put it back on. I wish they would, if that's the way it's supposed to be.
Hey, Joe, the road that goes around Man Lake, is that the county's or is that private?
Man Lake,
Private.
that's private road.
Yeah, that one is, and of course, Home Lake is private too.
Guys get the fence row taken out, out there by the, is it Anderson Cemetery or who's talking about?
That's where it was just all gone, I think they're working on the other one.
Oh, the one on the north side.
Going up, yeah.
I ain't been through there.
I'll be done with that, no problem this week, I'll be done.
Nothing too exciting. I guess are the guys, the mowing guys, are they got their hours in and gone, or are you done mowing for finished up?
Yeah, I've been gone for
A good one?
at least a month, yeah. Well, the first two have been gone longer.
Yeah, longer than that. Did you have 3 or 4?
Three.
What's Donnie up to, you know?
I talked to him the other day, he was just working.
Fiddle working on that.
Drew a little bit for it, and a few other people. He's actually gonna do snow plowing this winter for the IDOT, so it's getting some pretty good experience.
That's easier than sheet rock, that's for sure, or I think it would be. At least he's not picking something up over his head.
Might be easier on his back.
Yeah. Different kind of strenuous. Thank you, Donnie. We'll see you. Is that the one that's got a screwed up, will it not lift up?
I don't know,
I thought it always got shoved to the back, but maybe,
Keep it guarded.
maybe keep mosing back up here.
Halfway down this paper, you'll see where we got $4,000. Friday morning, Denise told me, Citgo's gonna be closed the next 2-3 weeks. I said, no, nobody's saying anything about it. They're getting ready to take their tanks out and replace them. We didn't have an account anyplace else, and it takes like a week or 2 to get an account set up. So we had a cash check for $4,000, have cash, so we can buy gas for the next 2 or 3 weeks, so that's what that's for.
they not let you know, I mean, they're long-term customers, and you think they're.
My wife checked with the girls that drive for the bus service, and they didn't know either. So like I said,
Some poor communication. I mean, all their counts that depend on them.
Yeah.
There you go, second more, six suckers. You're gonna have to start arresting some healthy people.
I checked with you look at the bill and see what the hospital charged us, it was outrageous, but John said he checked on it, we got the Medicaid rate, but it was still.
Still
what
way
we
on
ended
up
having to
there,
pay
huh?
for.
No doubt that's one of them games we can't get off, or,
He's gone now, but we had no choice then,
At the
we had
time.
to pay for it.
dang it.
So basically on that $4,000 charge, we'll just see, the gas bill from Cigna should be a lot lower.
Yeah,
It'll work itself out.
Yeah, still coming out of the same budget.
same line item there. And John said over the weekend, one day he touched 50 over there, so our population's back up again, and a lot of them are out of county, so paying customers.
I hadn't heard much about meth, are they on the heroin now, or what's it?
We're seeing a little bit more of that.
You know, Cigna, it seems like they redid that, remodeled that not 10 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know why they're having to replace them.
Yeah, just got some leaks.
I bet they don't.
Hmm.
I bet they don't got no leaks.
I think it's just,
I bet it's over regulation. We are in the great state of Illinois. See, when he said that, the first thing popped in my mind is, I'm gonna go get me some good fuel tanks. I bet they're good.
No, probably don't.
They dug them out at, what was that one by, Redwood Hall? You know what I'm
Martin's.
talking- Martin's, yeah.
Well, I always called it Martin's.
They dug them out and they pressure washed them off, and I just happened to drive through town one day and they looked brand new. Pulled in there, I said, hey, I wanna buy these tanks. Can't do it. He said, we gotta destroy them. EPA regulations, gotta cut a hole in them tanks and destroy them. They was in perfect shape. Pitiful. I don't know if they still gotta destroy them or not, but they sure make some nice tanks. Them tanks can't be that old, the store ain't that old.
I think all these newer tanks have monitors built on top of them or something. Maybe they were showing something wrong, I don't know.
That's about all we had this week.
Thank you, buddy. Wanna look at them? Same. Jason, was we gonna ask John about that, or Gerald, or what remind me of what your thoughts was?
well, I seen we got, I think, something in. That's just something, what,
That's a survey or
well, this
a
is.
magazine?
It's just your dues for that association.
That's something that, you know, we must, what benefit do we get off of?
Good question.
Well, they do lobbying for counties, and it's sort of like a county clerks association.
We never really ever attend anything that they have, do.
I'm not that aware of that you have.
I haven't. What's in the bill, 650?
675, and they do that based on population, I believe.
It's off this sheet, I guess, like right here. I'll show that. Oh, this is kind of in the sheet here. Oh, you show Gerald too. See what size the county is.
So then, give me your thoughts. Or have you seen that already? I found that a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Goodies.
Have we always been a member?
You have in the past.
I get that magazine every little bit from
Here or at home?
home.
I don't know if I can get one at home or not. I see them, isn't that what I see floating through here
Yeah,
sometimes?
I don't know if I get it at home, I know it's here.
They used to have a magazine called County to County. I don't remember seeing it on here.
I looked at it, but
I usually look over where they, people put in there what the salaries are for other offices.
Yeah.
in Surrounding counties, it's usually pretty interesting. It's those holidays, right? Jeff.
Do that, buddy.
Too many J's on it.
What holiday we had recently? Veterans Day's tomorrow.
It was Columbus Day.
That must be what I'm seeing.
They
They're
were
about to holiday you to death over there, ain't they?
Last week was election day, we got, you got holiday for that?
Oh, that's right, yeah. Maybe that's what I'm seeing. But you didn't. I think you gonna have to get some pull over there. Never a dull moment. No rest for the weary. I think we probably need that in the form of a motion, don't we, to approve those holidays, you know, what we normally do. Carol, you wanna make that motion to approve those holidays?
yeah.
I'll second that.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Now, Jeff, it says here, if I understand this correctly, you can get $400 for each regularly scheduled UCCI membership meeting that you attend.
Like a credit to the meeting.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's, are most counties in it? I guess.
Yeah, they did.
I guess it's okay.
That comes out of our budget, doesn't it? Our,
Yeah, I think there's a line item in there for dues.
major stack of bills. Be sitting on them, hadn't I?
All right, now let's see something.
If we paid in full by February 15th, we get 25% off, so
It's up to you boys.
bring it down to $500.
Sound good to you?
Yeah. There you go. Give one either to fill out things. Want those guys to start their presentation.
I don't know if anybody else wants to come in. I hate to start if somebody doesn't want to listen.
Uh,
Give them another 10 minutes maybe.